Growing up, I was pretty sheltered from horror movies. My earliest experiences with the genre came from my local Blockbuster Video. The frightening box art that lined the horror shelves was burned into my brain long before I saw any of those films. Whenever I walked past that aisle, my eyes landed on the same box. Jason Goes to Hell. I wanted to look away, but I had to see it. Part of it was the title. You want to scare a good little Baptist boy? Put hell in your title. But really, it was the art. It haunted me with visions of hellfire and limitless evil. I didn't confront the actual film until adulthood, and it wasn't quite what I had imagined. There are 12 films in the Friday the 13th franchise. Yes, I know, it's a shame they couldn't make it to 13. The franchise's entire history is a bit of a mess. The first film introduced us to Camp Crystal Lake, where a grieving mother slaughtered a group of teenagers to avenge her dead son, Jason.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned.
She died in the attempt, but the sequels reveal that Jason somehow isn't dead, and now he's avenging her death. Just roll with it. He finally died for real in part 4, which was subtitled The Final Chapter, but boy, it was not. However, that dishonesty is forgiven in light of Crispin Glover's dancing. I should turn away and walk right out that door because I know.
Hey, how come you turned that off?
The series briefly introduced a copycat killer, before finally bringing back Jason as a zombie for 3 more sequels. By the time Part 8 hit theaters in 1989, Friday the 13th had kind of outstayed its welcome. Seeing their cash cow was running dry, Paramount Pictures licensed Jason Voorhees to New Line Cinema. This presented an intriguing opportunity. New Line was already home to that other slasher franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Hoping to revitalize both properties, New Line greenlit a crossover film entitled Freddy vs. Jason. Before that could happen, Nightmare on Elm Street creator Wes Craven returned with an idea to reinvent the series he started. Freddy vs. Jason was put on hold to make way for Craven's film, the bizarre meta-sequel New Nightmare.
Is it a story?
Yeah.
So Freddy was back on track.
It's a story.
But what about Jason? New Line put Friday the 13th back in the hands of its co-creator, Sean Cunningham. He handed directorial duties off to his intern, 23-year-old film school graduate Adam Marcus. Marcus wanted a radical departure from the previous films, and Cunningham agreed. The franchise had already hit rock bottom, after all. The only way to go was up, right? Right? Jason Goes to Hell opens with a young woman alone in a cabin, not far from Crystal Lake. You know where this is going. She shows some skin, the lights go out, and sure enough, Jason appears.
It's a trap!
But in a welcome bit of self-awareness, this cliche opening is actually a setup by the FBI. Jason's used to preying on unsuspecting teenagers, and he doesn't fare well against opponents with real firepower. I like this movie's deconstructive streak. If a mass murderer like Jason kept slaughtering attractive white teenagers, it wouldn't be long before the authorities brought in the big guns. So Jason is dead as shit, and we're only 7 minutes in.
It's over. Go home.
Well, there is one thread left dangling. Jason's nasty, goopy heart seems to keep pulsating. The coroner finds that noteworthy and just so appetizing. And with that, Jason has found a new body, which he uses to slaughter everyone in sight and head back to Crystal Lake. His latest killing spree becomes fodder for the sleazy true crime series American Case File.
Born in 1946 to Elias and Pamela Voorhees, Jason was believed to have drowned in Camp Crystal Lake at the tender age of 11. Sadly, he did not.
That line of dialogue is a masterpiece. The American Case File producers have hired the clearly unhinged bounty hunter Creighton Duke to finish off Jason for good.
If you want him dead, truly dead, 500 grand is my fee.
Hiring a madman to hunt down a mass murderer may be outlandish and irresponsible, but it makes for great television. This leads us back to Crystal Lake, where a local diner is cashing in on the media blitz.
This makes a whole new patty.
The diner has another surprising connection to Jason. The waitress Diana is revealed as his heretofore unmentioned half-sister.
I know everything about you, Diana. I know who you really are.
She has a daughter named Jessica, who got knocked up by our sort of protagonist, Stephen. Jessica left town to raise her daughter Stephanie without Stephen's involvement. Why is this so significant?
There's only one way to put an end to that devil.
Tell me.
Information like that is very expensive.
This is where it all gets a little messy.
Are you ready to pay?
Yes.
Thankfully, Creighton Duke lays it out pretty clearly.
Jason needs to be reborn again, and he needs Jessica to do it.
Why, Jessica?
In a Voorhees was he born. Through a Voorhees may he be reborn. And only by the hands of a Voorhees will he die. He has only 2 blood relatives left in the world with the power to kill him or make him reborn. Jessica and her baby.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Duke is testing Steven's resolve, but I can't help but think he also just likes breaking people's fingers. Oh yeah, there's also a magic dagger involved. I almost forgot to mention it, but so did the filmmakers, so cut me some slack. At least they followed this classic bit of screenwriting advice. If your exposition turns out too dull, just break somebody's fingers.
Oh, fuck!
I think Sid Field said that.
Gotta get out of here. I've got to protect them.
The only way to do that is to kill Jason, and you can't. But Jessica can.
If you can get past this absurd premise, the rest of the film is quite a wild ride. Jason tries to obtain a permanent body while wiping out his entire family. Stephen goes to increasingly insane lengths to stop this, only to become the prime suspect in Jason's killing spree.
You want me to cuff you? What makes you think you can? I got a gun. Fuck that. I got a gun.
Wow, I got through the whole overview without mentioning the scene where a demon worm burrows into a corpse's uterus. Despite being a longtime Friday the 13th fan, Marcus also drew from several other horror franchises for Jason Goes to Hell. The most obvious connection is the Freddy Krueger cameo, which sets up Freddy vs. Jason. But there's another horror crossover here that's slightly more subtle, but even more interesting. For the uninitiated, that's the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the cause of all the undead shenanigans in the Evil Dead series. Its presence here could just be an Easter egg for horror fans, but Marcus had something bigger in mind. Jason Goes to Hell gets blamed a lot for its incoherence. To some degree that's fair, but much of the film's strangeness is inherited from the rest of the series. The Necronomicon was Marcus's solution for the central problem of Friday the 13th. If Part 1 tells us that Jason drowned as a child, how was he alive as an adult from Part 2 onwards? The series flat out ignores this issue until Jason Goes to Hell. Marcus couldn't make the Evil Dead connection explicit for legal reasons, but the film heavily implies that Mrs. Voorhees resurrected her son with the Necronomicon's dark magic. With its hints at a shared universe and a barrage of Easter eggs, maybe Jason Goes to Hell would play better if it were released today.
500 grand is my fee. And for that, you get the mask, the machete, the whole damn thing.
$10,000 for me by myself. For that, you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Instead, reactions were pretty harsh. Jason Goes to Hell didn't end up being the final Friday, but it did nearly kill the series. It bombed upon release in 1993, leaving the franchise on hiatus until Jason X in 2002. For a franchise that once released installments annually, that's a pretty serious gap. Most of the film's flaws stem from its disastrous production. The original script was so bad, Cunningham feared New Line would pull the plug on the whole project if they even saw it. Hoping to salvage his investment, he hired screenwriter Dean Lorey for a page-one rewrite. By the time Lorey joined the project, the people at New Line wanted to see the script in 4 days. To his credit, he managed to crank out a new script in time for the meeting. The New Line people thought it was pretty bad, but not bad enough to cancel the project, evidently. The main shoot moved quickly. Maybe a little too quickly. When the filmmakers finally took the time to review the footage, something they should have done every day but didn't, they discovered that nearly half of it was unusable. In addition to the quality of the footage, Cunningham took issue with the creative direction of the film. Why didn't they work these issues out in pre-production? Oh, right, because they spent less than a week on the script. Much of the final cut is the product of extensive reshoots. The result is a film that sometimes clashes with the rest of the series too much, and at other times overcorrects into dull self-parody.
Going to Camp Crystal Lake.
Oh, yeah? Planning on smoking a little dope, having a little premarital sex, and getting slaughtered?
It's a Frankenstein abomination composed of 2 competing visions, both ill-conceived from the start. Films like this show the limits of labels like good and bad in criticism. Sure, it's objectively a disaster, but there are dozens of little things I love about this movie. It all comes down to one vital factor: passion. The people who made this movie what it is were excited to be working on it, even if they didn't always know what they were doing. In light of this passion, and perhaps in spite of my better judgment, I can't help but recommend that horror fans watch Jason Goes to Hell.
Go home, folks.
Yes, that's a probe.